Seth was a reckless and daring boy with a single ambition, to become an unparalleled sorcerer. One afternoon, he hurried deep into the forest to meet his friend, Tommy, who was already losing his patience. When Seth finally arrived, Tommy snapped, asking what had taken him so long. Seth quickly apologized, promising to make it up to him. To Tommy's shock, Seth reached into his bag and pulled out several ancient magical books. Tommy gasped, asking if he had stolen them from Alma's library again. Seth just shrugged it off, claiming it wasn't stealing if he didn't get caught, and besides, he planned to return them before anyone noticed. He opened one of the spell books and tried to cast a spell, but nothing happened. He tried another, but the result was the same. Frustrated, Seth decided to stop following the books and use his own raw power. He gathered a massive surge of energy into his fist and struck a nearby boulder, launching it into the sky with incredible force. Tommy watched in awe, stunned by the sheer power, but their excitement turned to terror when they realized where the boulder was landing. It smashed right into a nearby farm, sending a stampeding herd of bulls charging straight for them. The two boys didn't stick around, they ran for their lives. Meanwhile, in the village, the sorceress Alma was shopping for supplies. The shopkeeper, fearful and biased, refused to serve her. Losing her patience, Alma threatened to blow up the entire shop unless he complied. Terrified, the men scrambled to get her items. Back in the forest, Seth was still desperately outrunning the herd. He muttered to himself that if Alma found out about this mess, she would absolutely crush him. No sooner had the words left his mouth than Alma appeared right in front of him. With a swift flick of her magic, she neutralized the disaster and saved the boys. She turned to scold Seth, but before she could speak, the villagers arrived. Instead of thanking her, they began shouting insults at Alma. Simply because Seth was an infected sorcerer, the people treated them both with hatred, blaming them for everything without reason. Seth tried to stand up for her, telling the mob that he was the one responsible and that Alma had actually saved them. But Alma stopped him, her voice cold and tired. She told him it was useless, that humans would never understand, and they would continue to hate sorcerers regardless of the truth. After agreeing to pay for the damages, she took Seth and left. Later that day, Seth was busy scrubbing the walls of their floating castle. It was his punishment for disobeying orders and causing chaos in the city. Frustrated, he turned to Alma and asked why she let the villagers blame her. He argued that since they were the ones protecting the people from danger, the humans should be grateful. Alma looked at him and explained the harsh reality. Humans see sorcerers the same way they see the nemesis, as monsters that threaten their safety. Seth shouted back, insisting they weren't monsters and that without sorcerers, humanity wouldn't survive. Alma simply replied that perhaps, if every nemesis disappeared from the world, humans might finally treat them as equals. The following day, Seth met Tommy in the forest. Once again, he tried to cast a spell, and once again, he failed. Tommy awkwardly admitted that his mother had forbidden him from hanging out with Seth because he was infected. The word stung, but Seth stood firm. He told Tommy that sorcerers are the only ones capable of confronting the nemesis, and he vowed that one day, he would defeat every single one of them. Suddenly, Tommy pointed toward the sky at a strange object falling fast. Seth's heart sank. It was a nemesis egg. Tommy panicked, saying they had to find Alma immediately, but Seth told him she was away fighting other nemesis on a different island. Gathering his courage, Seth told Tommy to get everyone to safety while he handled it himself. He reminded his friend that he was a sorcerer, too. Seth rushed home and grabbed every weapon and tool he could find, so many, in fact, that when his flying bats tried to carry him to the village, he was too heavy and crashed to the ground. Meanwhile, the egg had already landed in the heart of the village. As the townspeople gathered around the mysterious object in curiosity, Tommy arrived to warn them of the danger, but no one would listen. The villagers panicked, shouting that they needed to call the sorcerers immediately. They claimed Alma was the only one who could handle such a disaster. Suddenly, something plummeted from the sky and crashed right onto the egg. It was Seth. He stood up boldly and declared, "Don't worry, everyone. Now, where is the egg?" A villager deadpanned, "You're standing on it, idiot." It wasn't exactly the heroic entrance Seth had imagined. The egg began to crack, and a massive nemesis beast emerged from within. Seth wasted no time and launched an explosive bottle at the creature, but it didn't leave a scratch. He then drew his sword and struck, but the blade shattered the moment it touched the beast's hide. Within seconds, the nemesis swiped at Seth, slamming him into a building with such force that he could barely move. As the structure groaned, threatening to collapse, Tommy rushed toward his friend. The beast turned its sights on Tommy and charged, but Seth intercepted it at the last second. He shielded Tommy, shouting for him to run, even as his own strength began to fade. It looked like the end for Seth, but then, a surge of magical energy rained down from the sky, striking the beast and blasting it away. Seth looked up, stunned. A group of sorcerers led by an old sorcerer had arrived. It was the first time Seth had ever seen sorcerers other than Alma. The beast rose again, unfazed. The old sorcerer barked orders to his team, and they instantly moved to restrain the creature with a magical seal. Seeing them in action reignited Seth's spirit. He shouted to them, "Let me fight with you. I've done everything I can to become a sorcerer like you." The old sorcerer smiled at the boy's determination and agreed to let him help. However, the villagers immediately tried to tear Seth down again. One man yelled to the newcomers, "Don't trust that boy. He's the one who causes all the trouble. Seth felt his confidence crumble, but the old sorcerer stood up for him. He told the villagers that they were all sorcerers, and they had no right to mistreat Seth just because he was young and still learning. The magical seal began to crack. The old sorcerer told the villagers they had to evacuate, but they refused to leave their families behind. "We will help you get everyone out," the leader promised, "but we need someone to distract the beast." He turned to Seth and asked, "Can you do it?" Seth didn't hesitate. "Yes," he answered confidently. Everyone backed away as the seal finally shattered. Seth gathered every ounce of his strength and prepared to strike. As the nemesis broke free, Seth delivered a massive blow, but he was shocked to find that his attack did nothing. The creature's body had turned as soft and flexible as rubber, absorbing the impact completely. The nemesis leapt at Seth, chasing him relentlessly through the streets. He tried jumping and kicking the creature, but his physical attacks were useless against its rubbery hide. Just as the beast was about to finish him off, Seth dodged and gathered his strength for one more attempt. However, the creature was too fast, launching him across the village and slamming him into a building. While Seth was fighting for his life, Tommy and the villagers reached the bank where Tommy's father worked. They frantically explained the situation, and shortly after, the old sorcerer and his team arrived. But instead of continuing the fight, they looked at the crowd and asked coldly, "You're still here?" Meanwhile, Seth had come up with a plan. He found a magical chain and decided to use it to bind the beast. He drew the creature's attention, leading it into a trap, and successfully managed to restrain it. Believing the battle was over, Seth began to mock the monster, but his victory was short-lived. The nemesis suddenly shifted its form and unleashed a devastating surge of magic. Seth barely escaped as the creature's power leveled a large section of the village. At that same moment, Alma was finally returning from her mission. As she neared the island, she sensed the powerful presence of the nemesis and rushed toward the village at full speed. Seth survived the explosion, but his relief turned to horror when he heard Tommy screaming. He hurried toward the sound, only to find Tommy and the villagers tied up and held captive. The culprits weren't the nemesis, but the old sorcerer and his team. They mockingly told the villagers that it was their own fault for not fleeing when they had the chance. The group began looting the bank, stealing every coin in the vault. When Seth arrived, he was devastated. "What is happening here?" he demanded. The old sorcerer laughed, thanking Seth for keeping the nemesis busy while they collected a fortune. The villagers, blinded by their prejudice, immediately turned on Seth. They shouted that he had only befriended Tommy because he knew his father worked at the bank. Seth tried to defend himself, but his words fell on deaf ears. To make matters worse, the old sorcerer tossed a bag of stolen gold at Seth's feet, mockingly thanking him for his help. Seth didn't hesitate. He threw the bag back into the man's face, shouting that they were nothing but walking vaults and a disgrace to all sorcerers. Fueled by rage, Seth charged. He struck two of the thieves, sending them flying into the air, before turning his sights on the final member of the team, who barely managed to block Seth's attack with a magical shield. The old sorcerer looked down at Seth with cold eyes. "I don't care what you think of us," he sneered. "Humans treat us like monsters, so why should we bother protecting them?" But their greed proved to be their undoing. The magic used to block Seth's attack acted like a beacon, drawing the nemesis right to them. Seeing the beast break free from its restraints, the old sorcerer and his team abandoned the villagers and fled like cowards. The creature arrived moments later, finding Seth collapsed on the ground, seemingly powerless. The nemesis began to glow, gathering a massive surge of energy for a final, devastating attack that would annihilate everyone in its path. Despite his injuries, Seth forced himself to stand. He turned to Tommy and offered a final, reassuring smile. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll protect you as long as I have breath in my body. And I want you to know, Tommy, the people from the desert aren't evil." Recalling the old sorcerer's bitter words, Seth stood his ground and roared, "I am nothing like you. I will become the greatest sorcerer of all time." In an instant, the nemesis unleashed a blast of pure destruction that tore the village apart. From a distance, the old sorcerer watched the explosion, certain that no one could have survived such a strike. But as the smoke cleared, his jaw dropped. Seth was still standing. He had done the impossible, blocking the monstrous attack with his bare hands. Even as his magical gloves shattered into pieces, Seth remained an immovable wall. The villagers and the thieves alike were shaken to their core. They realized they were witnessing the birth of a legend in sorcery history. With a final, fierce battle cry, Seth gathered every drop of his remaining magic and charged. With one concentrated punch, he pierced through the monster's hide. The nemesis let out a final groan and collapsed, motionless, to the ground. Seth had won, but the effort had pushed his body to its absolute limit. He slumped to the earth, exhausted. Suddenly, the corpse of the monster began to twitch. The cursed creature was rising once more. Seth didn't have the energy left to move, let alone fight. Just as the beast prepared to strike, a blinding flash descended from the sky. A single, powerful blow cleaved the nemesis in half, ending its life for good. Alma had finally arrived. She rushed to Seth's side, pulling him into a protective embrace. "Rest now," she whispered softly. "You have done your part." Later, Seth opened his eyes to find himself back in the safety of their home, with Alma sitting faithfully by his side. The journey of the world's strongest sorcerer had only just begun. Waking up in a daze, Seth asked, "What happened?" Alma looked at him and replied, "The nemesis has been defeated. As for the old sorcerer and his team, they've been captured and handed over to the authorities." "Good," Seth muttered, but Alma's tone turned sharp. "No, it is not good. How many times have I told you never to use your magic without your gloves? If the Inquisition hears of this, they won't stay quiet. They will arrest you. To them, your power is unnatural, something beyond ordinary magic. They despise anything they cannot control or understand." She paused, her gaze heavy. "You've seen it yourself, haven't you? Humans and sorcerers will never truly understand each other." Seth looked back at her with newfound resolve. "Then I'll change the world. I'll defeat every nemesis in existence so we can finally live in peace. From this day on, I have only one goal. I will find Radiant, the stronghold where the nemesis come from, and I will destroy it." Alma was stunned. "Those are just myths and legends, Seth. No one even knows if such a place truly exists." "I don't care," Seth answered firmly. "I'll keep training and searching until I find it." Exhausted, Seth drifted back into a deep sleep. As he slept, Alma sat in the silence, her mind drifting back 10 years to the day they first met. Seth's original village had been completely obliterated by a nemesis attack. In the heat of that horrific battle, Alma had been knocked unconscious. When she finally woke up in an infirmary, her memory was a total blank. She knew nothing of her past or even her own name. Beside her sat young Seth, the only other survivor of the massacre. It was in that same disaster that Alma had lost her arm. The doctor told her that when they found them, she was clutching the boy in the middle of the flames as if she were his mother, shielding him with her own body. From that day on, Alma began a long journey to reclaim her lost memories, with Seth as the only link to her past. In those early days, she didn't treat him with the care she does now. To her, he was simply a lead, a thread she hoped would guide her back to herself. One afternoon, Alma left Seth at home to go hunt a nemesis. While she was gone, the local children surrounded Seth and began to beat him mercilessly, fueled by the same fear and hatred that still plagues the world today. The boy had experienced every form of pain and oppression. Under this overwhelming pressure, his magical power burst out unintentionally. When Alma returned, she found the house destroyed and Seth missing. It was the first time she had ever felt true fear for him. Elsewhere in the village, the locals had tied Seth up. They were preparing to burn him alive, shouting, "We must kill him before he touches any of us and spreads the curse." It was cruel. Humans truly believed that the infected carried a curse from the nemesis beasts. Suddenly, the torches in their hands were extinguished, and Alma appeared on the scene. She placed her hand on one man's face and said, "A small gift from me. You are now cursed, just like us." The man lost his sanity, convinced he was doomed. Alma then turned to the rest. "You think we curse you simply by touching you? Very well. How about I touch you now?" The villagers fled instantly. Alma rushed to embrace Seth, terrified for his safety. For the first time, she felt a true connection to him. From that day forward, she changed entirely. She realized there were things worth living for beyond her lost past. She made a decision and bought the airship they now lived on. Her only goal was to find a place where she and Seth could be accepted and live in peace. But they continued drifting from island to island, treated with the same hostility by humans everywhere. Finally, Seth decided he had to change all of that. The next day, Seth woke up to begin carrying out his plan. However, Alma caught him the moment he stepped outside. She knew exactly what he was thinking. Yet, the surprise was that she did not try to stop him this time. Instead, she handed him her flying broom as a farewell gift, along with supplies he might need. She also returned his gloves, which she had repaired. She told him, "Go, but I ask only one thing of you. Do not let your power turn you into a monster." "Seth," he replied, "do not worry. Your son will become the greatest sorcerer of all time." He left her, only to run back and embrace her one last time, crying as he thanked her before departing for real. Alma wept too, closing her eyes so her tears would not fall. The sky began to rain upon them, as if bidding farewell in the hope of meeting again soon. As Seth was leaving the village, he saw the very people who had despised him yesterday. Today, they looked at him with gratitude. Seeing this only strengthened his resolve to destroy the Radiant, no matter what it might cost. Meanwhile, Alma contacted the capital, Artemis, requesting a team to collect the remains of the nemesis beast that Seth had defeated. However, the agent dispatched arrived 3 days late. When he finally reached her, Alma asked, "What delayed you?" He answered, "I sent my assistant ahead of me, but it seems she got lost again." At that same time, we see our protagonist, Seth. He had accidentally collided with a flying ship, and the soldiers on board insisted on interrogating him. He tried to explain the misunderstanding, but no one listened. They surrounded him to restrain him. Forced into a corner, he used his magic to push them away. The moment their captain appeared, he noticed the horns on Seth's head and asked if he was a sorcerer. Seth admitted it without hesitation, and they captured him immediately. This is when we learn that these men are inspectors, and their mission is to arrest sorcerers. It seemed our hero's journey had ended before it even began. Our friend Seth tried to break the cage using his magic, but it was useless. The cage was made of black silver, crafted specifically to suppress sorcerers. He asked the inspectors, "Why have you arrested me, and what do you intend to do with me?" He then learned that they planned to imprison him in the capital's dungeon for 10 years. "At this rate, I will never reach the radiant nor fulfill my dream," he protested. They mocked him, saying, "That is nothing but a myth, boy." But Seth remained determined that he would reach that place and eliminate every nemesis beast with his own hands. The captain, seeing him as nothing but a foolish child, was questioned by his soldiers, "Are the sorcerers truly cursed?" He replied, "Of course. That is why it is our duty to capture and restrain them. Anyone who survives physical contact with a nemesis beast receives a curse upon their body that poisons them and causes ordinary people to hate them." They lowered Seth's cage into the city's underground chamber. He felt regret for not listening to Alma's warning to hide his horns. He remembered when she told him to go to Artemis and seek a man named Yaga, one of the strongest sorcerers alive, who might help him on his journey. Suddenly, while Seth was lost in self-blame, he realized he was not alone. There was another sorcerer imprisoned beside him. She was a girl from Artemis named Mealy, accompanied by a small familiar. She had been arrested while on her way to collect the nemesis remains in his village. She explained that she was unable to leave because she had been separated from the only person who could confirm her identity, Doc. The moment his name was mentioned, the ship shook violently. The inspectors had captured Doc's ship as well. Doc attempted to hide and stay quiet to avoid notice, but Millie exposed him instantly, shouting that he was her superior. She assumed he had come to rescue her. However, he neither saved her nor escaped, and he ended up imprisoned right beside them. Doc informed Seth that he had been on his way to collect the nemesis remains from the village. Seth proudly responded, "By the way, I am the one who defeated that nemesis." This only enraged Doc further. Since the remains had been torn apart during the battle, they were rendered useless. This cost Doc his reward and landed him in prison. At that moment, Millie's familiar seized the opportunity. He stole the cage keys from the deputy commander while he was distracted, allowing the group to unlock their cages. However, Seth insisted on retrieving his broom and belongings before fleeing. Unfortunately, Captain Dragunov spotted them and immediately ordered his soldiers to capture them. Seth used his magic to repel the soldiers while Mealy and Doc gathered his things. Mealy retrieved her staff and began fending off the attacks, but the assault intensified until the soldiers broke through her protective barrier and surrounded them once more. Then, Mealy's second personality awakened. She attacked the soldiers in a furious burst. She tried to convince them peacefully to return to their ship, but when they refused, she struck them down and sent them flying off the vessel. However, she failed to notice Dragunov, who had suddenly appeared before her and was moments away from killing her. At that instant, Seth intervened with absolute courage. He rushed toward them on his broom to stop the captain. He grabbed Mealy and Doc, carrying them back to their ship. They sped away toward Artemis, leaving Dragunov stunned after witnessing Seth cast magic with his bare hands. Before long, they reached the gates of Artemis. Seth proceeded to register his entry, while Doc grew uneasy, knowing that this meant he would now be Seth's guardian throughout his stay in the city. Suddenly, a clever idea came to document. He attempted to convince Seth to register as a full resident, claiming it was the only way to meet Yaga. He led him quickly toward the registration ceremony. It became clear that something suspicious was happening, but Seth was too distracted. He was astonished by the city. It was filled with sorcerers of every kind, none of whom needed to hide their power. Soon, they reached the ceremonial hall where nearly every resident of Artemis had gathered to welcome the new sorcerers. At that moment, the founder of Artemis, a cat named Master Lord Majesty, appeared. He welcomed the new members warmly and informed them that they would gain great benefits from their residency. All they needed to do was sign the contract. Seth hesitated at first, but Master Lord Majesty pressed him until he convinced Seth and the others to sign. Yet, the moment they signed, the true nature of the contract was revealed. They had become indebted to the Institute and were required to work as hunters to repay that debt. Only then did we understand why Doc had been so eager for Seth to register. He believed this was the perfect way to rid himself of the boy. Instead, he fell into his own trap, realizing too late that a guardian shares the same debt as the hunter. Seth remembered that he had been warned about this before, but disaster had already struck. Seth then declared that he would not follow Master Lord Majesty's orders and would leave the city the moment he found Yaga. After that, Seth left with Millie to search for the old sorcerer, deciding to explore the city in the meantime. They spent money on everything, causing Seth's debt to rise higher and higher. Matters worsened when they went to a tavern to ask about Yaga. Millie became enraged at one of the patrons and blew up the entire establishment, raising the debt to 12 million and granting Seth the title of King of Debt. Seth noticed in that moment that, despite the insane debts and overwhelming expenses, the sorcerers were living here with dignity. No sooner had he said that than a strange man appeared beside him and said, "Stop that, boy. Did you only realize this now?" the stranger asked. He then promised to lead the boy to Yaga, but first, he asked for his opinion of Master Lord Majesty's Institute. Seth replied that the cat was extremely suspicious. However, he admitted that at least no one here called them infected or treated them differently. They could use magic freely without being stared at with distrust. The man then asked, "And do you know why Majesty gathers all that money?" At that moment, Millie answered, "They use it for research to break the curses placed upon us." But the men replied, "There is another reason as well." Suddenly, the city's alarms rang out. They discovered that an attack was approaching. The Inquisition unit had tracked Seth down to arrest him, Doc, and Mealy. But at that very moment, the military force of Artemis, the city of sorcerers, appeared and blocked their advance. Orders arrived for the inspectors to retreat immediately. Only then did the group learn that Majesty used the funds to strengthen Artemis and protect its citizens. This was in addition to the presence of the 13 mages, each capable of standing against thousands of soldiers. Fighting Artemis, therefore, was equivalent to declaring war on an entire nation. For that reason, Captain Dragunov ordered his troops to retreat to the main headquarters. However, he decided he needed to inform General Torque that they had to mobilize at once. Once they had withdrawn, the old man turned to Seth. "This is the power of the Artemis Institute. That is why it is the only refuge for the oppressed people of the desert. Majesty uses every means to protect them." He then asked, "And what will you do when you meet Yaga?" Seth replied with confidence, "I will ask him about the Radiant, and then I will go destroy it, of course." But the men told him, "No one knows whether the Radiant truly exists or is merely a legend. Staying here and protecting this place is the logical choice." Yet Seth clung to his decision. He insisted that people outside Artemis face the nemesis threat alone, and that changing the world itself was the only way to save them. When the men saw Seth's resolve, he decided to help him. He revealed that he himself was Yaga, the very man Seth had been searching for, and one of the true giants of magic. Meanwhile, Dragunov went to General Torque. He informed him that he had encountered a horned mage capable of using magic with his bare hands, without gloves. The general ordered him to monitor Seth but to keep the matter strictly confidential. Back in the city, Seth officially introduced himself to Yaga and presented the letter Alma had sent with him. He then asked about the location of the Radiant, but Yaga burned the letter immediately. He said, "Whether you are Alma's student or not, I will not grant my power to someone without strength. If you want me to teach you, boy, show me your power and prove you are worthy." Seth answered, "Fine, that is easy." He gathered his power as he always did and struck a tree confidently, thinking he had succeeded. But Yaga struck him instead and shouted, "Are you an idiot? You gathered Fantasia in your hand and simply smashed it like that. Do you call that magic?" He added sternly, "I will not tell you anything about the Radiant until you master the fundamentals of offensive magic." The next day, Seth went to Millie's house and begged her to teach him offensive magic. But she apologized, explaining that she could only use offensive magic when she became angry and her second personality surfaced. He asked her to at least teach him how to gather Fantasia, but it was useless. She then said, "There is someone who can help you." She took him to see Doc, who was preparing to meet the girl of his dreams, Miss Melba, the owner of the cafe. When they arrived, Miss Melba came out to greet them and met Seth. Doc, as usual, drifted into a trance at the sight of her beauty. However, her father hit him immediately, starting a commotion. A bottle went flying and landed on Seth, a rather rough, friendly token. Miss Melba invited them to eat and sat down to speak with them for a while. Upon learning that Seth was searching for the Radiant, she admired his courage, but he explained that he needed to learn offensive magic first, and for that, he needed Doc's help as a researcher. Doc responded indignantly, "And you think I will help you after everything you have done to me? Is the debt you trapped me with not enough? I have not slept since the day I met you." But with a single encouraging word from Miss Melba, all of that anger vanished. Doc suddenly transformed into a gallant knight, determined to help. Of course, he regretted it moments later when he realized he had doomed himself again. Doc told Seth, "I will do nothing for you except read from the spell books." He began with the spell, Meteor Shower. Seth attempted to follow every instruction, but to no avail. He persisted, tried again, and finally succeeded in gathering Fantasia. However, he lost control of it and launched it directly at Doc, sending him flying. Seth tried to apologize, but Doc nearly abandoned him right there. Feeling guilty, Millie transformed into her berserk personality to help him. She decided to train him the hard way. She launched attacks at him, forcing him to counter, but it was useless. Then, a stray attack shot toward Miss Melba. Doc heroically threw himself in front of it, taking the hit in her place. Seth realized he had no option but to run from Mealy. She chased after him, destroying parts of the city as she went. After Seth was injured by one of her attacks and his gloves were torn apart, he crashed into a building. Suddenly, he noticed that the bridge above Mealy was about to collapse. He desperately used Meteor Shower to save her, and thankfully, he succeeded. The moment it happened, Mealy returned to her normal self and saw the destruction she had caused. Seth apologized to her profusely and thanked her sincerely for helping him. Then, he went to Yaga to show him his new skills. Yaga finally acknowledged his strength. They all knew that the Radiant was a forbidden region. Even the strongest sorcerers throughout history had attempted to reach it and failed. Naturally, a young boy like Seth would not be able to take even a single step inside it. For that reason, he had to train until he became one of the elite sorcerers. Yaga decided to take him as a disciple. However, he attacked the boy first to test him, only to discover that Seth needed to learn how to control his power before anything else. Since Seth had no home, he had been sleeping in the garden, but even sleeping there was not free. So, Doc was ordered to find him a place to stay. Seth asked Mealy if he could live with her. Luckily, she had an extra room, so she agreed, and he moved in. Seth began training day after day. In the mornings, he would go out with Mealy to have breakfast at Miss Melba's cafe. As usual, Doc's mood worsened the moment they appeared. Miss Melba offered Doc a taste of her new coffee blend. Although all her blends were usually terrible, Doc could never refuse her requests. Yet this time, he was shocked. He declared it was the best coffee he had ever tasted, but he did not enjoy the moment for long. Suddenly, a tentacle emerged from the drain beneath him and dragged him underground. Seth was startled, thinking it was a nemesis beast. However, Yaga informed him that it was a rare octopus-like creature known as a demonic kraken. It lived in the sewers because that was where the sorcerers disposed of experimental creatures. Fortunately, it did not eat humans, but it adored coffee. That was why it had appeared. The problem, however, was that Doc drank coffee constantly. His scent resembled the drink so strongly that the creature might eat him by mistake. We cut to Doc at that moment. He was terrified as he watched the creature drinking his coffee. He tried to escape in a panic, but the beast grabbed his leg and began sniffing him, preparing to eat him. Suddenly, the monster detected a strong aroma from afar. It rushed toward the smell, dragging Doc along with it. We then discovered that Seth and Mealy had gone underground, carrying a large bucket of coffee to lure the beast and rescue their friend. Yaga had refused to accompany them, leaving them to face it alone. He stated that if they could not deal with this, they would never be able to face a nemesis. The creature suddenly rose from the water before them. Seth and Mealy felt relieved when they realized Doc was still alive. Seth leapt forward to attack the creature and save him, but his strike was so weak that the beast did not feel it at all. Suddenly, it snatched the bucket of coffee from them and fled. When they tried to stop it, it sprayed them with ink until they lost consciousness. Meanwhile, Dragunov and his men continued to observe Seth. Dragunov felt that Seth was merely an ordinary boy and not nearly as dangerous as the general believed. To him, it seemed impossible for such a child to possess the overwhelming power the general spoke of. Later, Seth and Mealy returned to the cafe. They decided to try a new plan using the traps Mealy normally used for capturing nemesis beasts. But it was Doc who fell into the trap instead of the creature, while the kraken escaped with the coffee again. Next, they tried to catch it with a fishing net, but for the second time, Doc was the one who got caught instead of the monster. They decided to sedate it, but the result was predictable. Mealy lost her temper. Her second personality emerged, and she attacked the beast without success. They returned to the cafe with Seth, completely exhausted. Yaga asked if they intended to give up, attempting to discourage them by highlighting the dangers ahead. But Seth refused to abandon the mission, no matter what. Miss Melba tried to calm them down and brought out one of her inventions. At that moment, a different idea struck Seth. He took the bucket of coffee and descended with them to lure the creature. This time, Doc carried the bucket himself. Doc felt hopeless. He told them to leave him behind, deciding he would live in that underground place. He lamented that his life was full of disasters, so it made no difference whether he lived there or anywhere else with that creature. Seth responded mockingly, "Finally, I have seen someone who actually pities you, my friend." However, Seth was determined to save him. He threw the bucket of coffee onto the creature to carry out his plan. Doc was shocked, thinking the creature would eat him, but he soon discovered that this was exactly the plan. The creature swallowed Seth, but it immediately vomited everything out. Doc found Seth covered in coffee mixed with Miss Melba's strange blend, a taste so terrible even the monster couldn't stomach it. As soon as Seth emerged, he exploited the creature's weakened state and attacked it with Mealy's help. The first attack failed, so Seth gathered more power and was on the verge of finishing it. But Doc stopped him quickly. He now considered the creature his friend and could not bear to lose it. Days passed, and Seth continued his training with Yaga until, suddenly, his gloves tore during a session. Yaga took them from him and gave him new gloves made of black silver to prevent him from using magic. When Seth tried to remove them using his wits, he was electrocuted. He realized that Yaga was punishing him because he used Fantasia recklessly and harmed himself. In the end, Seth disagreed with Yaga's methods. Seth believed that gathering a large amount of Fantasia was proof of one's strength. Yaga asked him, "And what is your goal in in accumulating all that power? Seth replied, the stronger I become, the better. I will be able to eliminate the nemesis much faster. But Yaga told him, you have become so obsessed with pursuing power that you have forgotten the most important thing. He decided he would not remove Seth's gloves until the boy understood what that thing was. He even threatened to expel him if he tried to remove them himself. Seth grew frustrated, unable to grasp his meaning. However, Miss Melba's father, the boss, told him that Yaga never spoke without purpose. At that moment, Doc arrived and informed them that Master Lord Majesty had summoned them. When they met him, the cat told them that their debts had grown so massive that they had become the highest in the entire institute. Seth and Millie rejoiced, proud of breaking a new record. Meanwhile, Doc collapsed beside them, shouting, why are you laughing? This debt is on my neck too. Master Lord Majesty continued speaking, telling them they must repay what they owed. He assigned them several tasks, one of which was for Seth and Millie to clean the institute's rooftop. While cleaning, Seth and Millie noticed a strange broom moving toward the service gate. When they approached, Seth discovered it belonged to the same foreman team that had once robbed his village. It was clear they had escaped from Alma and were planning to steal the institute's hidden treasure. Millie rushed to attack them, revealing she had been training in offensive magic. However, they blocked her strike and counterattacked. Millie deflected their assaults and realized they were generating magic through their weapons instead of using magical gloves. The battle continued. She blocked every strike and retaliated, but without effect. Their leader noticed that Seth could not use magic because of his gloves. So, he offered him an alliance. He promised to help Seth defeat his own team in exchange for covering up their crimes. He admitted he admired Seth's strength, claiming that power was everything in this world. Whoever possesses it can make everything bend to their will, he sneered. Seth's anger flared as he shouted, do not talk to me as if I am like you. Yes, I want to grow stronger, but I will never use power in the pathetic way you do. I will defeat you without using magic at all. The leader laughed, saying, in your dreams, and charged at him with his group. At that moment, Millie shifted into her second personality. She blocked their attack and struck back with her full strength, but soon realized she needed a way to break the shield they were using. Then, Seth came up with an idea. He told Millie to attack once more. As her spell exploded, he launched himself upward, bypassed their shield, and struck the leader directly. At the same time, Millie took down the last member of the group and returned to her normal state, but the leader suddenly rose and grabbed her, threatening Seth with her life. That was until Millie's loyal companion, Mr. Bobley, attacked him and forced him to release her. But then, the leader slipped and fell from the rooftop. Seth immediately leapt after him on his broom. He tore off his gloves to use magic and, luckily, managed to save the men at the very last second. Later, Seth felt ashamed and went to apologize to Yaga for breaking his promise not to remove the gloves. Millie tried to defend him, but Seth remained deeply unsettled. Yaga snapped in irritation, and who said I was going to expel you? Even though you disobeyed my orders, I will consider you to have passed this test. You found the answer. He then returned the gloves to him. They were repaired, but now they were fingerless. He told him, you could not gather Fantasia properly because of those old gloves. You were drawing it with your arms toward the glove, and nothing more. I shaped them this way to protect you. Even though you can use magic without gloves, most sorcerers cannot. With these new gloves, you will finally make proper use of the drops you were born with. Seth was astonished by the dramatic increase in his power, and Yaga ordered him to prepare for the second stage of training. After training, Seth went to eat. Yaga noticed news reports about the inspectors in Rumble Town. Seth said they were bad people because they saw sorcerers as enemies, but Yaga replied, they are humans as well. There must be differences among them. You must understand this before you fight them. Otherwise, you will force yourself into making the same mistake. Meanwhile, Dragunov was flying aboard his ship as usual, preparing dinner for his squad. One of the new soldiers felt disappointed, thinking, is this really the legendary commander everyone talks about? He wondered why a commander was cooking meals instead of fighting sorcerers to maintain world order. Dragunov noticed the soldier's frustration. He tried to reassure him that he was not some mythical hero, just a man striving to do his job well. Suddenly, a violent storm struck and damaged the ship, forcing the soldiers to spend the night repairing it, with Dragunov helping alongside them. Soon afterward, a distress call arrived from another squad in a nearby region. Their ship had been destroyed, and they needed immediate assistance. Contrary to everyone's expectations, the damage was not caused by the storm, but by a nemesis. As for Seth, he was stunned by Yaga's words and said in disbelief, so, there are actually good people in the Inquisition. Yaga confirmed this. This applies to everyone, my boy, whether sorcerers or ordinary humans. Every person expresses who they are through their own choices. If you start judging everyone by the actions of a few, punishing the innocent for the sins of others, then you will become no different from the humans who hate all sorcerers. Meanwhile, Dragunov went to check on Conrad, whose ship had crashed ahead of them. He asked him what had happened to the nemesis after it attacked them. Yet, Conrad showed no concern at all. He was convinced he had already disposed of the beast. All that occupied his mind was reaching the treasure stored within the main headquarters. When Dragunov asked him about this treasure, Conrad showed him a group of sorcerers he had captured. the situation felt increasingly unsettling to Dragunov, who began to doubt him. He asked, "Why did you strike your assistant?" Conrad replied that the purpose was simply to force them to help repair the ship. Indeed, his men were forced to work until the vessel was fully restored. But suddenly, the nemesis appeared once more and attacked them again. Conrad assumed it was pursuing them specifically. Yet, Dragunov quickly noticed that the beast had no interest in them at all. Its clear destination was the nearby city. Conrad, however, cared nothing for the city as long as his men remained safe. At that moment, the new soldier objected, saying, "But the city will be destroyed." But the men called Conrad cared only about exterminating the sorcerers. Here, Dragunov intervened. He told him, "We hunt sorcerers because they sometimes endanger the lives of weak humans. In this case, the nemesis is the threat, and we must protect the people." Conrad grew tense and argued, "Our weapons are not enhanced with fantasia like those of the sorcerers. We cannot possibly defeat it." But Dragunov answered, "Even if we cannot kill it, each of us possesses our own methods of fighting." He then gathered all his soldiers and addressed them, "Do not worry. We shall return to our true duty at last. Although the nemesis is our enemy and is terrifying, and though I myself do not wish to kill it, I cannot order you to sacrifice your lives, but we must try." The soldiers grew fired up and shouted, "We are with you, Chief." With that, they charged forth to confront the cursed nemesis. Meanwhile, Conrad remained on the ship, praying for Dragunov to die, for the captain had humiliated him. But his wish did not come true. Dragunov returned after driving the nemesis away from the city without suffering any casualties. Although he had not killed it, he prevented it from flying and cast it into the sea to keep it away from the innocent civilians. Upon his return, he also arrested Conrad. He had discovered that Conrad was imprisoning ordinary humans and claiming they were sorcerers just to receive promotions, as he always did. Dragunov told him, "You are a disgrace to the Inquisition. You are no different from the sorcerers who endanger the lives of weak humans." He decided to have him judged before General Torque personally, then returned to his ship with his soldiers. Afterward, he cooked dinner for them as usual. But this time, the new soldier's gaze toward him was entirely different, filled with respect. Although Dragunov had eliminated the immediate threat of the nemesis, he remained uneasy. He had noticed a deep wound on the beast from the very beginning, as if it had been struck by a massive sword. Time passed, and suddenly a grand festival was held in Artemis. Seth was astonished to discover that Master Lord Majesty held a festival whenever he pleased. He thought, for once, that the cat might actually be doing something good. But Doc explained that the real motive was financial profit. The festival was designed to collect foreign currency and forge relations with other nations, ensuring that the Inquisition would not cause them trouble easily. Doc advised him to seize the opportunity and participate in the broom races, hoping he might win the prize money and pay off part of his debt. Indeed, Seth and Millie decided to join, discovering that the prize was 10 million. However, they had to pay the participation fee first. Since they had no money, they simply could not enter. Then, a strange boy appeared and told them, "Leave this place. This is no arena for the poor." It turned out he was the former champion of the broom races, named Nick. He was famous for exploiting his influence and wealth to obtain whatever he desired. He began provoking Seth by speaking of Alma and how she refused to join Artemis, saying she must be running away all the time because she was weak. Seth grew furious and told him, "Do not you dare speak ill of Alma. You know nothing about her." But Nick provoked him even further and challenged him to defeat him in the race. He claimed that if Seth were truly her disciple, he should be able to prove it. Seth accepted without hesitation. Millie noticed how deeply he trusted Alma, so he told her how Alma had supported him until the very last moment, even giving up her own broom for him, and that he must win for her sake as well. Seth entered the race, excited about the broom he owned. But he was shocked when he saw the advanced brooms the other contestants had, especially Nick's newest, state-of-the-art model. Yet Seth insisted on winning no matter what. Millie joined to support him, while Doc reluctantly paid the fees, hoping they would win at any cost. It became clear that Seth truly might pull it off. As soon as the race began, he started surpassing the other contestants despite his old broom, until he finally caught up to Nick and his team, who were leading. But suddenly, Master Lord Majesty appeared on his colossal broom. He began attacking the participants to eliminate them and claim the money for himself. Moreover, if they lost, their debts to the Institute would increase, making it a double victory for him. Millie blocked his attacks, and Seth rushed toward him to stop him. Master Lord Majesty fired his flame cannon, and everyone thought Seth was done for. But thanks to Yaga's training, Seth blocked the attack and charged forward, forcing Majesty to flee and accidentally blow up his own ship. The explosion caused Millie to lose her balance and fall, but Seth saved her quickly. Then, he dashed with all his strength to finish the race. He was incredibly close to the finish line, moments away from victory. But he suddenly slowed down when he saw his teammates fall. He chose to go back and save them instead. Although his act was noble and heroic, Nick was the one who won the prize, having crossed the finish line before Seth. Doc was furious because their debts had increased yet again, but Seth simply laughed and told him, "What is the problem, man? If they increase a little, they increase for the better." With their debts rising, Doc feared that Miss Melba would reject him if he ever confessed his feelings. So, he decided he must repay the debt as quickly as possible. Seth was gathering the work requests that had arrived earlier and began searching for a suitable mission. Every task was worse than the one before it, until his eyes fell upon a request involving the pursuit of an unknown nemesis. He felt a wave of tension, for this was the last kind of mission he wanted to deal with. He decided to pretend he had never seen it, but at that moment, Seth and Millie looked at the request closer. They discovered that someone from Rumbletown was asking for help in capturing a nemesis there. The Inquisition refused to believe it existed despite the continuous disappearances. Seth grew excited and decided to go capture it. They asked Doc to accompany them, although he tried to gently avoid it at first. When they insisted, he simply told them, "Go without me." They attempted to persuade him, reminding him that he was a researcher and could help them with his knowledge. But he became irritated and said, "I have made my decision not to take part in anything dangerous." Suddenly, Millie completely changed the mood. She began speaking passionately about Doc's bravery and strength, claiming that he was always ready to risk his life for others. Naturally, after all this praise, Doc agreed to go without thinking. As always, he regretted it later, but there was no escape, my friend. They boarded the ship to begin their journey, and Yaga came to bid them farewell. As soon as they departed, Dragunov, who was patrolling the area near Rumbletown, noticed Seth drawing too close to the city. The group tried to hide their documents to avoid trouble, but to their surprise, there were no inspection checkpoints at all, and they entered the city with ease. The sound of the factories roared so loudly it bordered on madness. Strangely, despite being one of the most densely populated cities, they did not encounter a single person from the moment they arrived. Ignoring this oddity, they continued toward their destination. Doc became exhausted halfway through, so they decided to rest a little. At that moment, Millie realized that her pet, Mr. Bobley, had gone missing. They left Doc to recover while they searched for it. Fortunately, they found the familiar easily, but suddenly, a nemesis darted past them as if chasing something. They ran after it to catch it, but within seconds, it appeared before them again, despite having been far ahead just moments earlier. Only then did they realize that there were two nemesis creatures, identical in appearance. However, this did not change their plan, and they decided to act immediately. Seth charged toward the first one with all his strength. He gathered a massive amount of Fantasia, just as Yaga had advised him, and unleashed it upon the creature while imagining the strongest person he knew, Alma. He indeed defeated the first nemesis successfully. He moved in to capture it, but its sibling abruptly intervened to protect it. The two creatures sprinted away as if someone had summoned them. Seth and Millie ran after them, only to be shocked when an entire army of nemesis creatures appeared, running alongside the pair as though they were all under hypnotic control. Suddenly, two massive hands made of cloth emerged, pulling any unfamiliar person directly toward a building. In an instant, they shattered Seth's broom. A strange figure wrapped entirely in bandages appeared before them. Seth asked in anger, "Who are you?" The men replied that he was Grim. Seth asked him why he was so interested in the nemesis. Grim answered that he, too, was hunting them, and that they might be the key to finding the person he had been pursuing for many years. But Seth grew furious and shouted, "These nemesis are ours." At that moment, Grim realized that Seth was part of a team, so he asked where the others were. Naturally, Seth refused to answer. Grim drew a massive sword and said, "I will not repeat myself. Choose your answers well." He asked Seth again what he intended to do with the nemesis, but Seth did not respond. Instead, he began gathering Fantasia and charged at him. Grim kicked Seth powerfully the moment he approached. Seth realized he needed to immobilize him to force answers from him. Grim launched his own assault, but Seth blocked the strike. He attacked again to distract the man, then leapt up to deliver a sudden kick. However, Grim unleashed an enormous burst of Fantasia the moment Seth drew near, shattering the walls behind him. Grim attempted to convince Seth to surrender, but the word surrender had no place in our hero's vocabulary. Despite his injuries, Seth rose again and rushed toward him. Grim parried the attack and moved in to finish him, but Millie intervened just in time and saved him. Realizing the situation, Grim chose to flee, but not before telling them he would meet them again as long as they continued to pursue the nemesis. Moments after he left, the Inquisition unit arrived, forcing Seth and Millie to run immediately. As soon as the commander learned they were present, he ordered a chase. Meanwhile, Doc was still lost in his dreams, imagining the fortune he would gain if they managed to capture the nemesis. He dreamed of paying his debts and becoming wealthy enough to finally propose to Miss Melba without hesitation. But before capturing anyone, the group decided to find the client who sent them the message to learn the details. At the same time, Conrad lost his composure because his soldiers had failed to catch them. He decided to step in personally. Right then, Dragunov arrived to visit him, provoking him with casual remarks. remarks. Conrad snapped and said, "You are no longer my superior. You should treat me with respect. I am a commander like you." Dragunov tried to humor him, but Conrad felt he was being ordered around. He defied him on every matter to prove his authority. When Conrad learned that Dragunov came to arrest Seth and his companions, he declared that he would seize this opportunity to capture all the filthy, infected ones as well. But Dragunov told him to forget that idea, for these were the direct orders of General Torque. Conrad grew furious and insisted he would not remain silent while sorcerers roamed his city. After that tense exchange, Seth, Doc, and Mealy set out to find the client who had sent the request. They reached his home, but the client slammed the door in their faces within seconds. Angered, Mealy's personality shifted. She threatened him harshly, forcing him to let them inside. They met the family and asked if their son had indeed encountered a nemesis, as the letter claimed. The father admitted that the creature had touched him, and they believed he had died. But the boy appeared then. His name was Taj, and he wore a strange mask. He claimed he had not met anyone, but suddenly, he sneezed, and a strange violet substance emerged from him, revealing that he had been cursed. He and his father tried to deny it, but there was no escaping what they had just seen. The family explained that they had reported the nemesis several times to the Inquisition, but no one had believed them. Doc told them they would need authorization from the Inquisition, otherwise, they would not be allowed to remain on the island or use magic. But the father replied despairingly, "What are you saying? Those people will never help migrants like us." They then learned that Rumbletown was full of massive factories which drew migrants seeking work, but the original inhabitants disliked their presence and distrusted them. This made the family's fate uncertain should the Inquisition discover the boy's condition. The family apologized and asked them to leave the island without causing trouble. But Seth, of course, decided to confront the nemesis and capture them alive. Taj offered to guide them to where he had seen them. They learned then that he had encountered one massive nemesis. Mealy realized that this was likely the original nemesis, the one who spread the curse, while the others they had encountered earlier were mere offshoots, smaller, weaker, and unable to pass on the curse. A short while later, they reached the building where Taj had encountered the beast. They began to sneak inside without being noticed. As soon as they entered, they found a feather tree. This tree usually appears in places where the nemesis dwell, and it is also used in the crafting of magical tools. But suddenly, the island began to tremble violently, as though it were on the verge of collapse. The Inquisition started evacuating people to the shelters. Doc decided to go with them so he would not die. But Seth refused, because the nemesis only appear when people disappear. Therefore, they mounted the broom and began observing from above until the nemesis finally appeared. Seth attacked them and trapped them inside the building. Suddenly, a strange flower emerged from their bodies and launched a magical strike. Seth tried to block the attack, but he failed. Mealy descended quickly to help him. She told him to restrain the creatures while she formed a magical circle to bind them. Thus, they captured 3 nemesis alive. Each of them began imagining the fortune they would gain from this capture, and just as Mealy was about to seal them inside a scroll to prevent their escape, 4 additional nemesis descended. It seemed their debts would finally be paid. In fact, they were about to become millionaires. But Grimm arrived immediately. He killed all the nemesis, destroying their dreams in a single instant, and then fled. However, the clever Mealy had placed a tracking mark on him at the very last second, ensuring he could not surprise them again. Because of his strange behavior, they began to suspect that Grimm was behind the disappearances mentioned by Taj's family. Doc decided he wanted to return to Artemis and abandon the mission because he was exhausted. When he insisted on leaving, Seth asked him about the strange marks that had appeared on the bodies of the nemesis during the fight. Doc explained that he had been studying them for years, but he still did not know their true purpose. He only knew that they glow whenever magical forces are controlling the nemesis, and that the sorcerers who control them are known as domitors. At that moment, a strange girl appeared, playing a flute. All the nemesis gathered around her. She apologized to the original nemesis for the death of the others and told him that she had finally reached the final stage after 15 years. The next day, a man walking through the city saw one of Conrad's followers gathering a crowd. He was convincing them that the migrants were responsible for yesterday's incident. He claimed they were cooperating with sorcerers and that infected to bring the city down. He warned that another terrorist attack, like the one 15 years ago, was about to occur and that they must not allow such a tragedy to repeat. The people were swayed by his words, and Conrad began to feel satisfied that his plan was progressing successfully. Dragunov came to confront him about what he was doing. Although Conrad tried to deny it at first, he eventually admitted that he wanted to get rid of all the filthy migrants who had polluted the country. Dragunov argued with him for a while, then said, "Do you not see that you are so obsessed with the migrants that you have allowed the nemesis to move freely within the city?" But Conrad denied it and asked if he had any proof. Dragunov realized there was no hope of convincing him. He then told him that General General Torque and the thaumaturge would arrive tomorrow to arrest the sorcerer Haimline, and that the general would reward anyone who did his work properly. At this point, Conrad grew tense, knowing that his plan would be exposed. So, he decided to use the hidden sorcerers to ignite a spark that would complete the rest of his scheme. Meanwhile, Doc was preparing to return to Artemis. Despite Seth's attempts to convince him to stay, Doc was certain that something was terribly wrong. The Inquisition was ignoring all Nemesis-related problems, and there was no guarantee they would receive any reward even if they captured them. But Seth decided to stay to help the people who might be attacked, and Millie remained with him. They went to Taj's home to have lunch with his family, but the surprise was that they found the house destroyed. They discovered that the Inquisition had attacked them and begun gathering all the infected, the sorcerers, and the migrants under the accusation of plotting a terrorist act. Conrad then gathered all his officers and repeated the same speech about an imminent terrorist attack. He warned them that if they did not act this time, the tragedy would repeat itself. But he reassured them that he would not let it reach that point, for he needed their help to eliminate the filthy insects that infested their country and polluted everything, even the air they breathed. Indeed, he succeeded in turning public opinion just as he had planned. He ordered them to hunt all the insects to restore balance to their homeland. The citizens began gathering any weapons they could find and went searching for sorcerers and migrants everywhere. At that time, Doc was still in the city. He hid and tried to escape quickly, but suddenly he stumbled upon an abandoned house where all the nemesis were gathered. He could not understand why they had been left there without anyone dealing with them. He decided to inform Seth first, then return to Artemis quickly, but one of the inspectors arrived unexpectedly and seized him. Meanwhile, the citizens had captured Taj. They tied him to a post and were preparing to execute him, following Conrad's orders. But Seth arrived in the final moment. He touched one of the mob members and shouted, "Take the blessing of the sorcerers." The men thought he had been cursed and fled with the others. Seth escaped with Millie and Taj on the broom. However, Conrad's men spotted them. They ordered the cannons to be prepared and aimed. The soldiers told Conrad they first needed to evacuate the civilians, but he shouted, "There is no time to waste on trivial matters like this. To protect our beloved homeland, we must make sacrifices. Do you not understand?" Seth realized that the Inquisition had arrested Taj's family simply because they had hidden the boy. He decided to take revenge on Conrad, the men responsible for all this madness. But suddenly, the townspeople arrived to capture them. Seth decided to flee quickly. Millie, however, began to transform and lose control. She prepared to kill the mob. Seth had to grab her and run before she acted recklessly. He told her, "These people have lost their minds out of fear. Attacking them will only make things worse. We must find Conrad and stop him." As they fled, Conrad fired the cannons at them, ordering them to surrender. They deflected the attack, and Seth rushed to destroy the cannons while Millie helped him block the shots. Conrad then entered the fight himself and began attacking Seth. When Millie attempted to assist him, Dragunov suddenly appeared. He knocked her magic staff from her hand and arrested her. Seth tried to free her, but Conrad warned, "Think carefully, or your other friend will die." Seth then realized that Doc was imprisoned in a cage nearby, looking in dire condition. Soon, Seth and Millie were thrown into the same cage. Conrad began beating Seth, dragging him to the ground. He removed Seth's gloves to prevent him from using magic, though Seth warned him not to underestimate him. Conrad then dragged him away to continue the interrogation in public. Because of Doc's critical condition, Millie tried to heal him, but without her magic staff, and locked inside a cage made of black silver, she was powerless. Doc tried to tell her about the nemesis he had seen, but he was too weak to utter a word. Meanwhile, Conrad headed toward the town square where the citizens had gathered. He dragged Seth and Taj out before everyone. He announced that the boy had confessed. The migrants had been hiding an infected person. And not only that, he claimed they were hiding a live nemesis in the slums as a secret weapon. Seth denied all of this immediately, shouting, "That never happened. The Dominator was the one controlling them." Conrad already knew this, but he continued to manipulate the citizens to find an excuse to execute his criminal plan. Once he achieved his goal, he closed the gates and imprisoned the citizens. He declared that everyone present would be eliminated, whether sorcerer or ordinary human, because there was no time for morality now. Seth shouted furiously, "Why are you doing this?" Conrad told him that he despised the migrants' culture, their old beliefs, and everything that belonged to them. That was why he wanted to eradicate them. Seth clashed with this foolish reasoning. He decided to stop the men himself. Gathering Fantasia in his hand, he struck Conrad with all his strength. Conrad was shocked that the boy could use magic without gloves. Yet, Seth's attack did not cease. While Conrad's men continued to hurl explosives at the people, Grim arrived at that very moment. Fortunately, he absorbed every projectile into the bandages wrapped around his body. He then treated Seth's wounds and asked whether the Dominator was his friend. Seth told him he did not know her at all. Grim returned all the absorbed shots toward the cannons to destroy them, assisting Seth as if offering an apology for their earlier misunderstanding. He revealed that he had been searching for the Dominator from the very beginning. At that moment, the Dominator, Haimline, appeared atop the clock tower. She gathered Fantasia around her until she formed a massive vortex, then seized control of the nemesis beasts and began spreading them throughout the city. Grim launched himself toward her to stop her before disaster struck. Seth ordered Taj to hide and decided to confront the girl himself, but Conrad rushed forward in an attempt to take revenge. Seth tried to convince him that this was no time for battle, but he soon realized that Conrad had been allowing the girl to act freely to further his own plans, which was why he had been ignoring the nemesis entirely. Meanwhile, Millie was imprisoned with Doc, who was nearly dead. One of the nemesis was approaching them. If she did not escape, she would die alongside him, but her familiar saved her at the last moment and returned her magic staff to her, allowing her to rush outside and fight the nemesis. Seth continued fighting Conrad, but Conrad nullified all his magical attacks using his spear, which was forged from anti-magic silver. Despite the nemesis attacking the citizens, Conrad's men refused to open the gates under his orders. Dragunov intervened and reminded them of their true duty, to kill the nemesis, not humans. Thankfully, the soldiers understood and united their strength to fight the monsters. Suddenly, Millie arrived and eliminated the nemesis attacking them. Although it was a perfect chance to capture her, Dragunov let her go because she was not a priority at that moment. He rushed toward the remaining nemesis. Amid the chaos, Haimline addressed the citizens. She told them they deserved the fear they were experiencing now, for it was the same fear she and her friends had felt 15 years ago. She announced that only the final scene remained. She increased the concentration of Fantasia around the tower. Seth realized she intended to shatter the massive bell and drop it onto the citizens to kill them. Taj rushed out to open the gate to let the people escape. Conrad tried to attack him, but Seth stopped him and continued fighting, despite being unable to move his arm. Seth mocked him to distract him and buy Taj some time. However, Conrad uncovered his plan. Even though Taj managed to open the gate, Conrad, that tyrant, had already prepared a second barrier. He was determined to wipe out the citizens at any cost to maintain his cover. But the shocking twist came when Haimline deceived him. She hurled the bell down not onto the people, but onto the street that housed the weapons depot, the ironworks, and the Inquisition's headquarters. She destroyed everything Conrad had built over the years. Conrad erupted in rage and demanded to know why she had done it. She replied, "How about I tell you a little story from the past?" She began recounting her life 15 years ago. The Inquisition had arrested her and her infected companions, intending to recruit them to fight the nemesis. Though the townspeople initially welcomed them, they were soon thrown into prison with criminals, and the citizens began calling for their execution. At that time, a glimmer of hope appeared. Major Akame, the commander of the Inquisition unit. He always reminded them that they were not monsters, even playing melodies to distract them from the hateful shouts of the crowd. But there was one man who hated that change, Conrad. He wanted to eliminate them at any cost, constantly insisting they were monsters. Yet, Akame stood against him, telling him that there was no difference between him and them, and that his inability to accept those who were different was the source of his weakness. Conrad's anger grew, and he vowed to destroy them. At first, he pretended to befriend them and opened the gate for them to escape, but they did not know that he had already spread news of their breakout to terrify the citizens. By the time Akame arrived to save her, none of her friends remained alive. Back in the present, Conrad blocked Seth with his spear. He declared that everything happening was their fault, that their very existence was a sin, and therefore eliminating them posed no problem. With every word he spoke, Seth's power increased. Finally, he shattered the spear and absorbed the attack, using Fantasia to reduce the damage to his body. Even with this overwhelming display, Conrad refused to back down. He hurled Seth away and launched forward with his spear at the same instant so Seth would be unable to defend himself. As the battle raged on, the unexpected happened. Seth absorbed the impact into the bandages wrapped around his arms, exactly as Grim had done before. He then gathered an immense amount of Fantasia in a single hand and struck the structure with overwhelming force, neutralizing the assault with sheer audacity. He shattered the entire wall beneath him, thereby opening a path for all the citizens to escape. At that moment, Dragunov appeared and decided to arrest him, but Haimline attacked them again, forcing Dragunov to leave Seth to deal with her, intending to capture the boy afterward. Seth immediately rushed to stop her, while Grim was simultaneously fighting her with all his strength. Yet, she deflected every one of his attacks effortlessly. Grim created a smoke screen to confuse her and attempted to seize her. He asked who had taught her to tame the nemesis, for such an ability required years to master. She did not answer, so he warned that he would exterminate every nemesis if she did not stop. She then drew a hidden blade and lunged at him. The moment Grim saw blood, he panicked and fled instantly. Meanwhile, Millie was fighting the nemesis with all her strength. When Seth reached her, she burst into tears and told him that Doc had died. But Seth pulled Doc from his bag to show her he had turned into an infant. They discovered that after dying, he had returned to life as a baby because his curse was reincarnation. As they rejoiced at his return, Grim suddenly arrived to warn them of Haimline's growing power, urging them to flee the island before she annihilated them all. But Millie told told him she had a plan to sever the nemesis power. Grim understood Millie's plan instantly and reassured her. They took Baby Doc to a safe place, and then they all headed toward Haimline to carry out the mission. However, Haimline attacked them with the nemesis immediately. They fought them off one by one until her assault intensified. She struck Seth, but an unknown person saved him at the very last moment and dragged him quickly inside the tower. It turned out that this person was a boy with horns, just like Seth. Grim sensed Seth's heartbeat and knew he was still alive, so he continued the plan without hesitation. When they finally reached Haimline, Grim distracted her with a smoke screen, and Millie attacked. But Haimline skillfully blocked the strike, leapt onto her giant flute, and struck Millie swiftly in the face. She hurled her away and attacked repeatedly, threatening to kill all the city's inhabitants if Millie insisted on standing in the way of her revenge. Millie tried to reason with her and convince her to stop, but she refused to listen. So, Millie pulled out her magical trapping box and sealed Haimline's Fantasia inside it, preventing her from using magic or controlling the nemesis. At that moment, Grim summoned his massive sword and began eliminating all the nemesis in the area. Meanwhile, Seth was inside the tower with the boy who had saved him. His name was Pyodon. Pyodon asked Seth why he sealed his power behind the bandages on his face. Seth explained that he used them to cover the wound he received in his first encounter with a nemesis to prevent his curse from spreading, which was exactly what Yaga had once told him. But Pyodon told him that doing so meant he did not truly understand Fantasia, and that in this state, he could not control his real power. Then he asked him, "For whom do you kill, Seth? Do you kill for the people who have no power, yet treat the infected with cruelty and kill them? Or do you fight for the infected who will be slaughtered because of persecution? Or do you kill for the Inquisition, in which case you will be forced to work with people like Conrad?" At that moment, Seth heard the sounds of the battle raging outside. He thanked Pyodon for saving him and left without giving an answer. As for Grim, his power had run out, and he was no longer able to defeat the remaining nemesis. Haimline then unified her remaining Fantasia with the Fantasia of the nemesis, ruining their plan entirely. She continued to fuel the cyclone meant to destroy the city, but Seth suddenly emerged from the tower and stopped her. The girl grabbed a spear and rushed toward him, demanding, "Why have you come here?" Seth blocked her attacks and answered, "I came to stop you, of course," and ordered her to cease destroying the city. She refused and continued fighting. She gathered all her Fantasia and hurled it at him, and Seth tried to block it with his own power. She asked him, "Why do you try to help your enemy?" He replied, "I want to protect the people of the city, nothing more." Hearing this, she lost control of her emotions. Her power surged and she struck him, screaming that the people did not deserve protection. But Seth rose once more. He told her that Conrad was the cause of everything, not the citizens. She answered, "If you think eliminating one member of the Inquisition is enough, then you are a naive child. It is the people who support the Inquisition to gain what they want, and who hide behind its shield." Seth responded, "If we kill them simply because they are prejudiced against us, then we will be doing exactly what he did." But she told him, "No matter what we do, they will always fear us and call us infected. Then she asked him, "Whom do you stand with, exactly?" He told her, "I do not stand with anyone. I will use my magic to save everyone." She attacked him again and shouted, "The people you save are the ones who oppressed sorcerers, the ones who deprived me of my mother, the ones who killed my friends. And when the nemesis appear, they expect us to sacrifice our lives to save them. If you intend to protect people like that, then you are nothing like me." She struck with all her strength, but Seth resisted her and shouted that she was wrong. She halted her attack and stepped toward him. Seth admitted that he was just like her, unable to forgive them. He confessed that he had thought many times about destroying everything, but what always stopped him was the despair he felt. Thus, he understood exactly why she acted as she did. The girl felt comforted and wept on his shoulder, but he continued, telling her he did not wish to become the monster they believed him to be. He then pulled out the scroll that contained the sealed nemesis power unified with hers. He released it harmlessly, nullifying her attack and preventing the island from collapsing entirely. The girl had believed that Seth would hand her over to the Inquisition. Yet, he told her that such a thing would never happen. He asked her what she hoped to gain by becoming evil. She replied that the conflict between ordinary humans and sorcerers had existed since ancient times, and that there was no solution except for each side to choose the faction they would fight for. But Seth told her that there was no need to choose any side. He asked her to help him destroy the Radiant. Then, she would rid herself of all the nemesis, and everyone would finally live together as friends. But suddenly, a massive projection shaped like an old man appeared. They discovered that it was General Torque, who had arrived alongside a thaumaturge, a wielder of a special force known as Miracles. The old man ordered them to hand over Seth, claiming he was accused of killing Colonel Von Teeps. Seth was shocked, for he knew nothing about this accusation, though strangely, he felt as if he recognized the name mentioned even before defending himself. Suddenly, Haimline seized Seth. She had decided to use him because she sensed his importance. She offered the Inquisition a deal. She would hand him over on the condition that all imprisoned sorcerers be freed and that the pursuit against them be stopped. Naturally, they refused. She then moved with Seth until she reached her scroll. She fused her power once more with the nemesis and attacked the soldiers. Exploiting their distraction, she handed Seth the scroll and told him she could not continue the journey with him. Then, she charged toward the thaumaturges to fight them alone. Seth tried to help her, but Grim and Millie grabbed him, pulled him onto the broom, and escaped quickly. While Haimline was engaged in battle, General Torque arrived and struck her down from behind. At that moment, Seth lost control of his emotions. He charged at the general with all his power. One of the thaumaturges appeared suddenly to stop him and decided to kill him, but Seth began transforming in a strange way, as though someone else was controlling him. With a single blow, he defeated his opponent. He then rushed toward the elderly thaumaturge, Almana Balyer, inflicting a severe wound upon her. General Torque activated his sword force and attacked Seth, but Seth deflected the strike, sending the general flying. Then Santori attacked, causing the collapsing building to fall on top of them. But Grim and Millie managed to grab Seth and escape quickly. They headed into an empty area where Grim revealed a coffin containing living people. They discovered that the disappearances were indeed caused by him. He had been hiding the innocent people to protect them from the conflict. Suddenly, a massive ship from Artemis arrived. It picked up Seth and his companions, and they fled swiftly. In that moment, Seth drifted into his memories and saw Pyodon there. He asked him why he had done all of this. He realized Pyodon was the one who had controlled him and turned him into a monster. But Pyodon told him that it had been the only way to save him. Seth grew angry, saying he could no longer distinguish friend from foe, and that he had seen images and memories unknown to him. He asked whether Pyodon had caused all of this. Pyodon answered that this was Seth's own power, that it had always existed within him, and that all he had done was help him reach it. Seth asked him, "Who are you, and why do you look like me?" Pyodon replied, "I am your older brother." Then Pyodon asked Seth why he felt frustrated despite defeating Conrad. Seth answered that he knew there were many others like Conrad. A week later, Seth finally awoke from his coma. He discovered that Grim had treated him and saved him once more, but when he tried to speak, pain surged through him. Grim explained that General Torque's attack had caused those wounds. The general's sword force, unfortunately, cuts through magic and destroys magical weapons. Wounds caused by it could not be healed through any sorcery. Thus, Seth might never be able to use Fantasia with his injured hand again. But Seth did not mind. He believed he brought nothing but destruction through his power anyway. He asked about the state of Rumble Town. Grim told him that the thaumaturges were overseeing its restoration. No one knew exactly what would happen after Conrad's disappearance, but things would at least be better. Then he asked about Haimline's nemesis. Millie reassured him that they were living peacefully in a facility belonging to the Institute. Seth felt relieved, knowing he had protected them just as Haimline had wished. After that, they went to visit Miss Melba after a long absence. There, they learned that the entire city spoke of them as the heroes who saved Rumble Town, especially Seth, who had saved the people from the evil witch known as Haimline. Seth felt sad, for everyone still believed she was wicked. Suddenly, a message arrived from Master Lord Majesty, informing them that he would hold a celebration that night at his castle and inviting them to attend. Millie grew excited and asked Miss Melba to accompany her. Hearing this, Doc decided to purchase a growth potion to grow quickly so he could dance with Miss Melba at the celebration before someone else could take her from him. He indeed grew a bit, but not enough to look like an adult. After the celebration, everyone chanted the title, King of Debt, which had become our hero's nickname. Master Lord Majesty spoke of his achievements and asked him about his next step. Seth replied that he would search for the Radiant. Though they were surprised, as the Radiant was considered a mythical place, they trusted his strength and chanted his name again. Then, the crowd lifted Master Lord Majesty and threw him into the air in celebration, allowing Seth to escape the chaos with difficulty. Once outside, Seth encountered Nick, who envied him and claimed Seth's fame was mere luck. He asked for a duel to see who was stronger, but Seth ignored him. Nick then provoked him, saying he looked frightened. He mocked Haimline, claiming she was not powerful at all, merely a low-ranked witch, and that none of them possessed the strength that Seth had. Seth could not endure his words. He suddenly lunged at him and shouted, "Do not speak of her like that. You know nothing of what she went through, nor why she wanted to destroy the city." He then cried out angrily, declaring that many sorcerers suffered just as she did, and that people feared the nemesis and their curse. That was exactly why he wanted to destroy the Radiant the moment he had the chance. Seth asked the crowd whether anyone knew anything about the Radiant, but no one answered. He walked away in disappointment. He then went to visit the nemesis beasts left behind by Haimline. He recalled her words when she told him that they were not evil. His pain deepened, and he no longer knew what to do. Suddenly, Alma appeared and struck him because he had not contacted her since leaving. She told him Millie had informed her of what happened and that he seemed to have gone through a hard time in Rumble Town. He told her he was no hero. He said he could not save Haimline, that he had turned into a monster and lost control, and that he had caused trouble for everyone since he left. Alma struck him again and told him, enough drama. She showed him a letter from the townspeople, thanking him because his help had completely improved the state of the city and eliminated the conflicts among the people. They wrote that one day, he would go to Artemis and become a hero like them. Alma added that even if he could could not save some people, many things had changed because of him, just like what happened with the people of Pomp Hills, his former village. Even Millie had postponed healing her own wounds to treat him because he had saved her. Seth then felt relieved and thanked her, vowing that he would destroy the Radiant and change the world, no matter the cost. However, because of what Conrad had done to eliminate the migrants, the people's trust in the Inquisition began to wane. In an attempt to fix the situation, General Torque decided to deploy his forces to Kandor to eliminate the Sorcerer Knights. This would inevitably push them into a war, especially since the Knights lacked sufficient weapons. At that time, Pyadon was speaking with General Torque nearby. He asked the general about a certain man. Torque replied that he was a man who believed in preserving justice and order in the world, but he was completely different from himself. This man did not believe he could change the world with his own strength alone, which was why he had never been promoted. Meanwhile, Dragunov tried to reach out to the surrounding nations, hoping they would lend his crew food. However, they refused because their trust in the Inquisition had diminished after the recent events in Rumble Town. The soldiers fell into despair. A new recruit went to speak with Dragunov, asking him what they would do now. He lamented that despite fighting to help people, they were treated with the same harshness as the corrupt Conrad. The recruit felt that the world would never improve, no matter how hard they tried. But Dragunov told him that this meant they must simply continue to do what was right to ensure a good outcome. He added that he believed even a single individual could change the world, and that they had no choice but to do everything they could. We then cut to Seth, who had headed to the cafe with Alma. There, he discovered that the coffee beans had run out. Rumbletown connected the northern and southern continents, and the trade rights for coffee and wheat had to pass through there before being delivered to Artemis. Since the area had become unfit for trade after the recent destruction, obtaining supplies had become difficult. Millie assured them that no one would die for a lack of coffee. However, Doc suddenly recalled his friend, the coffee-loving Kraken, who had been hiding. When he went to check on the creature, he found it on the verge of death. He begged Seth and Millie to find coffee by any means necessary. After a long search, they succeeded and saved his friend. But Doc nearly died again upon discovering that Master Lord Majesty had sold them a single cup of coffee for 100 million. At that moment, a summons arrived for Dragunov from headquarters. This prompted him to leave the ship in the care of his deputy and take sole responsibility for what happened in Rumble Town. Meanwhile, despite Seth's attempts to move forward, his past and the memories of Rumble Town continued to haunt him. Coupled with his constant fear, Seth asked Alma whether he had become a monster. Alma decided to accompany him to visit Yaga to discuss the Radiant, but upon arrival, they discovered he had departed. He left a message for Alma, stating he did not wish to meet her, yet requesting that she inform Seth to go to Caseline Merlin. Having heard that the Sorcerer Knights there were searching for the Radiant, Seth asked her what Caseline Merlin was. She explained that it was the capital of Siphonder, and that the Inquisition had decided to expel the sorcerers there to restore the reputation they had lost. Seth grew angry and resolved to stop them before they harmed innocent sorcerers again. Despite Alma's fear, she left the decision in his hands, just as Yaga had requested in the message. The old master had affirmed that Seth had matured and would find his answer along the way. Seth decided to journey to Caseline Merlin and requested the assistance of Doc and Millie, as was his custom. Yet, Doc refused, unwilling to endanger himself again. When Millie insisted on helping Seth, Doc reminded her that she was his assistant. He instructed her to fetch the tools he needed for their work and to settle their debts. Seth felt frustrated and said, "I thought we were friends, document." Doc replied that he had been fortunate to survive last time, having fought the thaumaturges and defeated. Seth hesitated at his words. He began to reflect that he truly needed to fight to reach the Radiant, questioning whether the Nemesis were truly evil. Ultimately, he realized that there was no alternative but to reach the Radiant and uncover the truth for himself.